Here comes the new champion, Tony Pruitt.
Today's guest is an interesting guest. I actually grew up watching this guy as a kid growing up on every Saturday night on Channel 11. He is a voice of world-class championship wrestling and a member of the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame. Please welcome Marc Lowrance. How you doing, my friend?
Well, I'm doing well, Tony, but I got to ask you something here. You said you grew up watching me.
I did.
How old are you now?
Well, I'm 58, and I know that you probably did start in 79 or 80. Am I right on that?
I'm 61, so you didn't grow up watching me when you were too young.
No, I wasn't too young, but I'm still a kid today. So,
well, I have a playful vanity with my church about my age, so I'm playing that off of you right now.
Well, that's okay. But I did grow up. You are part of my childhood memories. So, and I grew up a wrestling fan. Were you a wrestling fan growing up yourself?
I was not.
Really? So how did you get into the role of the voice of wrestling?
Well, it was the summer of what should have been my senior year of college. And you've heard the expression that somebody's real smart and they crammed a 4-year college program into 3 years or 3.5 years.
Yes.
Well, I was so smart, I was going to cram a 4-year college program into 4.5 years. So I should have graduated in May of 81, but I was going to go back and finish in the fall that year. Mm-hmm. And I'd been doing some broadcasting work. I was with the Texas State Sports Network, or actually the Texas State Radio Network doing sports. We had 178 affiliates around the state then. Was the hockey guy in Fort Worth for the minor league hockey team. And there was a hockey fan who was the sports announcer for Channel 5 in the Dallas-Fort Worth area who was a transplant from Michigan. And he went to all the Fort Worth games. And he called me that June when I should have just gotten my degree. And he said, "Mark, there's a PA job open in the area. Are you interested?" And I thought, Texas Rangers, Dallas Mavericks, Dallas Cowboys. Well, sure.
Heck yeah.
And he said, "Well, Fritz von Erich is going to call you." And I thought, Fritz von Erich, wrestling? No way. I knew nothing about it. I had flipped through and seen Bill Mercer doing it, wondered why Bill was doing that. But I didn't give it much thought. And I figured that I would just respectfully decline if I ever got the call. Well, it wasn't 15 minutes after Mr. Harms hung up that my phone rang again. And in those days, it was a landline phone there in my little apartment.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a gruff voice introducing himself as Fritz von Erich. And he said he needed my help for 3 weeks because the announcer he had was going to be singing in Europe for 3 weeks. And I was going to be the fill-in. In those days, wrestling in Dallas was on Sunday night. And then in Fort Worth, it was on Mondays, which it always was. Mm-hmm. And the way the deal was going to work, I was going to start out on a Monday night, then do Sunday, Monday, and then one Sunday, and I'd be done. Well, Fritz offered for a young guy more money than I was making with the hockey deal. And if it was just for 3 weeks, what did I have to lose?
Absolutely.
So I went down to Will Rogers Coliseum a week later, and I really was just the PA announcer, the ring announcer, introduced the wrestlers and talked to the audience that was there. Bill Mercer was doing TV for Channel 11. And they had to tell me who the wrestlers were. I didn't know who David Manning was, didn't know who Bronco Lubitsch was, didn't know any of the wrestlers. But I did it and went to Dallas in the following Sunday, back to Fort Worth, and did that 3-week deal. They paid promptly. They were very pleasant. They were honest. They were complimentary. And so at the end of that deal, when I worked that last Sunday night, I thanked them and said, if you ever need anybody, be sure and give me a call again. I don't think Fritz was ever there. for any of those 6 appearances. And so the next day, I was out at my mother's house in West Fort Worth, and it was about this time of year, see, when this gig ended.
Mm-hmm.
And my birthday is July the 5th. And I was out there, and I think she was fixing some kind of dinner in honor of my birthday on a Monday night. And about 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the evening, their phone rang. And it was Fritz von Erichs' secretary on the phone saying, there's been a mistake. Mark is needed at Will Rogers Coliseum tonight.
Oh.
And so I was very surprised, very confused. We rushed the dinner, and I ate, ran down the street, put on a coat and tie, and I could be to Will Rogers. The show didn't start till 8 o'clock, so I was there about 20 to 8. And good to go. And no one ever explained to me what the deal was. They were just acting like I was the permanent ring announcer, and away we went. So that's what happened, and I don't know whatever happened to the guy. Boyd Pierce had been his announcer a long time,
right.
Wore the wild sport jackets. His wife made those out of drapery material.
No kidding.
And Boyd had left, and I think Fritz had trouble filling the job. And I think, and I'm speculating on this, but I think Fritz gave the 3-week deal as a trial so that if I didn't work out, he had an easy out.
Right.
Because you can get a lot of clowns, a lot of hams. Yeah. Of course, I fit the bill perfectly with that description. But he liked my work, and so it was my deal, and that's how it started.
Did you enjoy doing that?
It was great fun from the very beginning. There was a stockbroker in Fort Worth who was a talent scout and coach for the Miss USA beauty pageant, who had known Fritz, had been a business advisor to Fritz, and he was the timekeeper. His name was Joe Ranelli. You may remember Joe Ranelli.
Remember the name?
Later, when I did TV work, Joe became the ring announcer. But Joe was a lot of fun, very educational. Bill Mercer was nice. And as I got the hang of it, you know, it was just great fun.
Wow. There's been a lot of changes. I was researching your interviews and your history on YouTube, and it just brings back a lot of memories that I have. And it made me realize how many things have changed. I mean, throughout the years. And one of the main things I noticed was the kids used to run up to the ring and get autographs signed before the match. I don't know if you remember that or not.
Oh, yes.
They don't do that anymore. And it's just the little things like that I've noticed. But I've been watching this wrestling since I was 7 or 8, 9 years old. My dad was a fan, so I grew up a fan. My brothers were fans. So you grow up watching this, and it's kind of like a soap opera for men, kind of. I mean, it's just entertainment. It's fun. There's storylines and stuff like that. And you just felt like you were part of the family. I mean, you knew the referees, you know the announcers, you know the wrestlers, you know what's going on and stuff. But how much preparation did it take for you to do a show before airing?
Well, now, when I was just doing the ring announcing, all I did was get one of the printed programs, you know, that they sold to the audience. They brought complimentary copies back to the locker room. And that's really all I needed to do, that and promote next week's card and, anything special. So it was very simple. It's just show up and do it. It's like being the PA announcer. I did TCU football and basketball for 10 or 11 years. And, you just show up and you do it. It wasn't until I started doing the TV work that it did take some prep time.
And did you put a lot of time into that, or did you just wing it? Or
well, when I started doing TV, they would have a production meeting pretty much all day at the Sportatorium in Dallas on Mondays up in Fritz's office. And then they would load up and come to Fort Worth and get over there about 6:30, and I would be there by 7. And I would spend 30, 40 minutes with whoever the booker was, Gary Hart or Ken Mantell or whoever it was. We had a lot of bookers, sadly.
Right.
And they would go over what we needed to get across that night. But when you're in the mix every week like I was, and every Sunday in Dallas and every Monday in Fort Worth, and then later every Friday in Dallas, you know, you were aware of the overall direction of things. And so the 30 or 40-minute prep time was enough to have you ready for the show. And then you'd get more instructions when I would go back between matches, between bouts for the main event, and we'd fine-tune things then.
Did you know the outcome of the matches before they started? I'm sure you did.
No, I really didn't, because it really didn't make any difference. There were occasional times where something special was going on where I would ask, so I could build the crowd in the right direction. One day was when Kerry won the world title at Texas Stadium in 1984. There'd been tremendous buildup. The death of his brother David, there was a lot of emotion. It almost had a little bit of a church worship type atmosphere to it. And if the belt wasn't going to switch, I wanted to carry the audience a different way to celebrate just the fact that Kerry got that far. But then if he was going to get the belt, I wanted to build that where it was, you know, a real miracle happening.
So you didn't know he was going to win the belt that day?
Well, I asked that day. I knew in advance so that I could, you know, build my spiel to go the direction I wanted it to go.
One of the best things I enjoyed the show were the interviews where you interviewed the wrestlers and stuff. Do the wrestlers, do they pay for that time, or is it just part of the gig?
No, they pay. They do not pay anything. It's just part of the gig.
Okay.
They pretty much are coached in what they say in those interviews, given their own personality and their own twist on it.
Did y'all practice that on and off, or did you just go with it?
No, they just happened. They were live interviews. The guys prepared with the booker, and out they came.
Did you ever get nervous before a show or anything like that, or jitters or anything, or you just, it wasn't no big deal to you?
Well, there was always an air of professional excitement because you wanted to do a good job.
Sure.
And, of course, the bigger the crowd was, the more excitement there was. Mm-hmm. The promotion sold out the Dallas Sportatorium for about 2.5 straight years, every Friday night from 83 through, or late 82 through 85.
Right.
And
big.
That was always exciting. And of course, Reunion Arena, we had crowds of 18 and 22,000 people. Mm-hmm. We had huge crowds in Fort Worth at the convention center for our big shows, Cotton Bowl. Mm. So, it's just fun, and it wasn't as much nervous as it is being excited.
Gotcha. So I'm going to ask you 4 questions, 4 memories, and just tell me what comes to mind. What would be one of your favorite memories about the Cotton Bowl when y'all had the matches there? Anything stand out?
Not really. The Cotton Bowl show was always different for me. It was a part of the state fair. And by the time we got into doing the Cotton Bowl, there were some issues with the promotion. The death of some of the key wrestlers. So I never got as excited about the Cotton Bowl. It's fun to go over there. My dad had season tickets to the Cotton Bowl when the Cowboys played there, and I went there as a little kid. But the other venues brought me more excitement.
I was going to ask you, what's your favorite memory about Texas Stadium? I'm guessing it'd be Kerry Von Erich when he won the belt and you were the announcer.
Yes, that was great. But also that gimmick they did a year later where Gino Hernandez took that chain and beat that new Lincoln Mark, whatever it was, up. That was also very, very exciting.
What about the Reunion Arena?
Well, Reunion Arena was great because we would sell it out. The atmosphere was tremendous. That's where we had the cage door incident where the Freebirds turned heel. Michael Hayes was there as Santa Claus one year.
Oh, yeah.
Most of the time, Bill Mercer would do the TV for those shows, because later on, when the promotion expanded and the Channel 39 production started in Dallas, which was the syndicated show, Bill advanced as the senior announcer to do that, and I got the Channel 11 show. But there were times at Texas Stadium where Bill had a conflict with the University of North Texas. Then it was North Texas State. And so I would do the TV at Texas Stadium. And Bill wouldn't even be there. And I like Bill. He's a great guy. He had a great career. But it was exciting to get to do the TV.
I bet it was. And then finally, the Sportatorium. What comes to mind there?
Sportatorium was a dump.
It was. But it was an icon. It was icon.
Yeah, it was. A lot of people didn't realize what a dump it was, but it was old. It was run down. It was hot. It was cold in the winter. Part of it burned down in the 60s, and they just walled part of it off. But the acoustics were remarkable in there. Even if you had a sparse crowd, the acoustics could be really good. And the concessions they had there, they had a big, deep frying grease fryer for corny dogs and French fries.
Yep.
And that stuff was just fantastic. The beer just seemed colder because it was so hot in there.
Oh, yeah.
And they had a gas flame popcorn popper, and their popcorn was better than any movie theater you'd ever go to.
I remember, that's one of the memories that I have. My grandfather took me when I was about 9 or 10, and I remember the smell of the food. And it was like being at the state fair.
Yeah, it was. And, of course, the building was also infested with big rats.
Oh, really?
And, they would flee, of course, when the crowd was there. But as soon as it came, the crowds left, they came out.
So how hot did you get wearing that tuxedo outfit in the Sportatorium with no air?
Well, it'd be hot, especially under those TV lights. But I wasn't overly active physically. And we would have breaks during the show to go get water or cool off in the back a little bit. So for a young guy, it wasn't too bad.
Well, I remember being very hot. Let's talk about Bill Mercer for a minute. He's a legend by all means. How well do you know Bill Mercer?
Well, I know Bill, but I wouldn't say we're best buds, but we have a good relationship. Bill and I went to New York about 5 years ago and did a gig for a promotion up there, and it was great to connect with him again. And we've talked several times since then. Bill had a great career.
He's getting up there in age, isn't he? What, 90 or something?
He is well into his 90s, and I don't have his number. It's somewhere in this house, but I'm not in possession of it.
Well,
and I need to call him.
I'm sure that he could have. You could have learned a lot from a guy like that. But did you socialize with any of the wrestlers back then at all?
I did not. My work is pretty limited to the Mondays in Fort Worth and the Sundays or the Fridays in Dallas. We moved from Sunday to Friday in Dallas when the Channel 39 show started, so that was probably in 82.
So you just kept it pretty much business. So, okay. Were you aware of all the drugs being used back then?
I was not. I was remarkably naive and remarkably sheltered from that. And I didn't you knew that some of them were going to do that. That's just, sure. young guys at that stage of life. But I didn't know how rampant it was.
Right. Because
as those guys began to make good money in 82, 83, 84, 85, they didn't have anybody to coach them. Mm-hmm. And the promotion didn't have any managerial help to teach them how to invest and how to make good choices. So they were partying and indulging, and some of them got carried away with it.
Looking back, who was good to work with and who was bad to work with, or who was hard to work with? Anybody come to mind?
I had a great relationship with nearly everybody I worked with. Chris Adams was hard. Chris was was very challenged in terms of his moods. I'm not sure if he had some manic depressive issues. I know he had a bad temper. Chris could be great, but Chris could be really foul sometimes. Other than that, I had a couple of more nondescript wrestlers try to be pretty unpleasant and demanding, but I just didn't pay any attention to him. Fritz had an ethic about his announcers. He wanted the fans to trust and respect the announcer just the way we looked at Howard Cosell or Frank Gifford or Kurt Gowdy or Jack Buck, any of the great professional sports announcers of the day. And so he told the wrestlers, don't touch the announcer, don't rough up the announcer, keep the announcer neutral. And when they see you respecting the announcer, they will too, and they'll believe what he says.
It's pretty good advice. I grew up a Fritz von Erich fan. My father was a Fritz von Erich fan. So what kind of person was he?
Well, Fritz was always very, very nice to me. I would hear stories. There was a hard background in that Atkinson family. Fritz's daddy was pretty tough and could be violent and abusive. But Fritz was always very nice. He was complimentary. He had a good sense of humor. He was very intense. He didn't want a bunch of laughter and cutting up when it came to our production. He was very serious, but Fritz was good to me. He was fair. And I remember talking to Fritz when he was on his deathbed by telephone. And I said goodbye to him, and he thanked me, and I thanked him. So Fritz was not a perfect guy. None of us are. Sure. But I think he's gotten way too much criticism.
Oh, he looks like a very intimidating person. So I don't know if that's true or not, but I was wondering why. Do you have any idea why they never let him win the NWA belt?
I have no idea.
I just always wondered that. In many ways, the world-class wrestling, they say nowadays, was way ahead of their time. They played the music when they come into the ring. They did other things. And I've heard people say that if they had a chance to go global and they chose not to do that, or I guess Fritz didn't do that, they would have been the WWE of today. Have you heard that as well?
Yes, there was a lot of speculation that Fritz never would take the promotion where it needed to go when he had the opportunity. Wrestling TV was always kind of a paid commercial. The promoters, whoever they were in the regional territories during the heyday of wrestling, would buy time on their local TV channels. And so the production was usually very simple. But when the brainstorm came for the world-class show that was produced out of Channel 39 in Dallas, and Mickey Grant got involved in it, that's when the slow motion, the instant replay, like you say, the big musical entrances, you had cameras in the ring. The style of Texas wrestling was so realistic and so rough that it illustrated itself as being, just like real sport. And it just skyrocketed, and it revolutionized wrestling production work all around the country. Even Channel 11, that was always just a simple 2-camera operation, one up in the balcony and one, I don't even remember where it was, may have been even higher. They went to a 3rd camera and started doing the close-up and things like that because they had to in order to compete.
Yeah, that's amazing. So do you know who wrote the storylines, or was that just the wrestlers doing it themselves, or do you have any idea who did that?
No, it's like an ongoing sitcom or a good soap opera. And those production meetings that they had on Mondays were the gelling and the collaboration of the story writing for each individual piece of talent, the projection of their personality, the little things that would happen along the way, the antagonism of the heels and the bad guys, and all of that would come together, and they would debate it and fine-tune it, and then come out with what they needed for that night and the next few weeks after those booking meetings.
Pretty good. Let's talk about the popularity of the Von Erich. I heard that they were regarded like rock stars. I heard that they had to shut down Six Flags one time. Do you know anything about that?
I remember hearing that. Fort Worth used off-duty Fort Worth police officers that were in uniform for our security. And we all knew each other, and they were made aware of the key elements. They were there every week, so they knew who the heels were. They knew who had the heat, and they did a wonderful job. They were classy guys. I just did the funeral for one of them here back before the holidays. Dallas had their own private security force that Fritz hired, and they had old-fashioned police uniforms that they wore. They also were great, but they'd really get rough over there if they had to. They had an old fuse room there at the Sportatorium where all the breakers and fuses were, old buzzing orange fuses lit up. You talk about hot in there. It was really hot. And if somebody got out of line, they took them in there and just beat the holy hell out of them.
Wow.
And threw them out and never came back. But yes, the popularity was rampant. And security had to constantly make adjustments to give the fans access, but do it safely. And those Von Erich boys became some of the biggest stars.
Oh, yeah.
Not only in our area, but wherever TV went, and especially overseas, where the syndicated show was seen.
Were you still announcing when Kerry Von Erich decided to go to WWE and leave Dallas?
No, I left a year and a half after Jerry Jarrett had bought that promotion in '88. And Kerry's departure and Kevin's problems with Jerry all occurred after I had retired for full-time ministry.
So you should have stayed. See what? It's all your fault.
That's right.
Well, tell me what you remember about the fabulous Freebirds. Were they charismatic? What you saw is what they really were? Or?
Yeah, they were
like a lot of fun.
They were three very strong personalities, but all of them were different as night and day. And they complemented each other very well. Buddy Roberts was loved by everybody. He trained a lot of wrestlers. He was very good with the mechanics of wrestling. Just a wonderful coach. Terry Bam Bam Gordy was the big bully personality. He was very intense. He was big. He was imposing. Michael Hayes in the ring was the flamboyant, obnoxious, overbearing personality. It was just, perfect. And he was good enough in the ring to get by with the other two. Mm-hmm. He was very interested in the direction of the promotion, contributed greatly to some of the world-class planning. And later in his career, Michael made great contributions to the wrestling business, whether it's with Bill Watts. I think he did some time with WWE. I'm not sure of that.
I think you're right.
But Michael had a great mind for the business and would have been a good booker.
Tell me something about Gary Hart. What do you remember about Gary Hart?
Well, Gary was the booker when I went to work for him. And Gary was very nice. Gary was different. The wrestlers liked him. You didn't want to be on Gary's bad side because he appreciated loyalty. He had a good following of people that were in his clique. If Gary didn't like you, Gary didn't like you, and there wasn't much room for grace or forgiveness. I was never in Gary's inner clique, but we never had any problems. I liked working for Gary. He had a tremendous mind for the business. He took it seriously. He was a good verbal explainer of what I needed to get across. And Gary came back and did booking a second time midway through my 9-year tenure with them. And we had a good relationship then.
Yeah, he was a character. I mean, he was a great interview guy, I would imagine. So now you had to go through a lot of tragic moments in this wrestling business. Anything come to mind? Any particular I mean, it's all tragic, don't get me wrong, but is any one particular moment that you recall specifically?
Well, I went to David Von Erichs' funeral service up in Denton.
Mm-hmm.
And being fairly new to the promotion, I didn't, I knew David. We weren't great buds, but David was always very nice to me. David was going to be heir apparent to Fritz because he had those same qualities. He could do the business of the promotion. The level of grief, especially with his mother that day, who was just in hysteria, that was a really get your attention sad day. And that promotion lost something that never recovered when David died. Yeah. And so I'll never forget that day.
Right. Well, there was a lot of wrestlers that came through the Dallas area. I mean, they didn't stay, but they came through. I mean, guys like The Undertaker, I think he started out there, and Stone Cold and Mankind, and there's many others. Can you recall any wrestlers that come to mind and just came through for a week or two at a time, like maybe Andre the Giant or somebody like that come to mind?
Well, we had occasional big stars. T. John Thibodeau, whose gimmick was, being so huge. Andre the Giant, who was world famous. Harley Race, the former world champion. We had several of those that would make occasional appearances that would make a card special. The world champion, whoever it was, and for most of my days it was Ric Flair, their bookings were made by the NWA and all the promoters in collaboration together. Fritz was one of those. They were all made up of the regional territories. Cowboy Bill Watts, Paul Bosch, Jerry Jarrett, Vern Gagne, Atlanta, New York, all that. We had a lot of talent that came in when world class took off. Jim Cornette, Jim Hellwig, who was the Dingo Warrior, later the Ultimate Warrior, Stunning Steve Austin, as you mentioned, became Stone Cold Steve Austin. Those guys would have stayed with us and really advanced had the promotion been willing to go national. But when they saw that they were limited to Fort Worth and Dallas and these weekly spot shows, the TV ratings weren't enough to help them make the big money. And so we became a minor league for the WWF. Then it's what it was called, World Wrestling Federation. And a lot of the talent didn't stay. Yeah,
I can see that. Well, I've got 3 questions that people have asked me to ask you, so I'm going to ask you the first one. Can you name me a wrestler that was portrayed as a heel or a bad guy that we would be surprised to know is really a pretty good guy?
They were really all that way. Some of the most enjoyable personalities were the heels. Because they had to project their personality in ways to get people to dislike them. Mm-hmm. So they tended to be more humorous. They tended to be more creative. They tended to be more outgoing. When you think about it, the Von Erichs lived by that good boy image, but they never really had dynamic personalities. All they had to do was just kind of to be good and play off the heels, and they did great. But Gino Hernandez was a wonderful guy and such a wonderful heel. Chris Adams, when he wasn't in one of his moods, could be a fun-loving guy. Michael Hayes, all those heels were just really, really special. Skandor Akbar was one of the most conversational guys, one of the nicest people you'd ever want to be around. Helpful, really? Funny, creative, interested in life, interested in sports. Everybody loved and respected Akbar.
See, I never would have guessed that. See, that's what I mean. Yeah. Very interesting. All right, question number 2. Did you ever feel at risk during a match or an interview? Now, you already said it was hands off of you, but was there ever a time that you did feel like you might get hurt or injured or of any kind?
Not in an interview or in a match. There was one night in about 86 or 7 that Abdullah the Butcher was a big heel for us. And Abby was that spike-carrying, bludgeoning madman managed by Gary Hart. And the bedlam in Dallas was going on, and as was always the case, I always would just move out of the way. We all did. Mm-hmm. But one night, I wound up in Abdullah's path out on the floor.
Oh, that's not good.
And he wasn't expecting it, and I wasn't either. And so I knew he was going to have to nail me because he would look bad if he backed off. And I knew when he nailed me that I had to sell it, so to speak, and make it look like I was really decked. Well, I don't know what he did to me, but he did it, and I just hit the floor and was out and had to be helped out of the arena. And Abdullah was affectionately called Abby in the back, was also a very nice, gentle, smiling, cooperative, fun guy.
Wow.
And it had all happened so fast that when I got back in there, he was waiting for me with a big grin on his face. And he put his arm around me and he said, "You didn't feel a thing, did you?" And I said, "Abby, I didn't feel a thing." And he said, "I told you I know how to work."
All right, last question. I don't remember this ever happening, but supposedly David Manning got caught in the ropes with his neck and you saved his life. Was that for real, or was that planned?
That was all part of the show.
Okay.
And they told me when it would happen and what to do when it occurred. And so I got to be a real baby face that night because, like I say, the ethic had always been keep the announcer out of the action.
Right.
But that night was an exception. And I'm glad I got to be the baby face because that night, I had saved David's life from choking.
I don't remember that happening. But anyway, tell me about your induction to the Hall of Fame. When did that happen?
Well, I've been inducted into a couple of little halls of fame, but one I think was the Texas Hall of Fame and one was a local deal. And they were just nice events, Mm-hmm. Just a few years ago, not a whole lot of people there, but it was fun to go back and be honored and have a few people still remember how young and good looking I was.
Absolutely. You're known nationally. You're the man. So I got something I want to show you. Does this ring a bell with you?
Let me enlarge. Yeah, that looks like one of our old belts.
Yeah, the NWA Championship. I was going to actually have it on and have you introduce me and do an interview, but we couldn't ever get together live. So, by the way, talking with Tony Nation, we were going to do that, try to get together live, but it just didn't work out because of the virus and stuff. But just wanted to have a little fun with my belt with you, too. I thought that would be so fun to be interviewed by you as a wrestler. So, anyway. So, what are you doing
gotta
now?
learn. You got to learn to put it over your shoulder like that.
Yeah, I sure do. Here we go. You can just announce me as Big T, and then we'll use that as a promo.
That's right. Here comes the new champion, Tony Pruitt.
There you go, Big T in the house. Tell me about. Tell us what you're doing now. You're a pastor, right?
Yes. My wrestling years were a great chance for me to work my way through seminary because I made the decision to pursue that after several years of wrestling with it, no pun intended, in the spring of 87. So I went back to seminary in the fall of 87, and I stayed with them through the summer of 90. So I was well on my way. I just had a year of seminary left when I retired. And that was a great way to go to class in the daytime and even some evenings during the week and have Mondays and Fridays free to finish wrestling work.
Perfect timing. So in closing, is there anything you want to add to this interview? I mean, I really appreciate your time, by the way. We've been trying to get this to happen for, a month or so?
Yeah, we have. The virus keeps changing everything. A month ago, it looked like things were going to be clearing up. But
I agree. I know.
No, I'm just very grateful for my years. I learned a lot about life and people, the tragedies of the Von Erichs, their struggles, the death of great people like Gino Hernandez and Bruiser Brody, helped prepare me for ministry to understand the nature of life, being compassion, caring for people. When I took over the Channel 11 show in 82, in those first few weeks, Fritz was very active. And he took me aside one night and he said, "Mark, you sound great out there. I'm proud of you, son, but you look terrible." And he said, "What you've got to learn to do is let your face express what you are saying verbally. Go stand in front of a mirror, because you're trying so hard, you're coming across as arrogant and aloof."
Really?
And that was wonderful advice, because it taught me how to develop a rapport with our audience. Because in those days, we didn't have a color man. It was just Mark. And I had to be the play-by-play guy. I had to be the promoter. I had to be the family friend. I had to be the psychologist. And so I developed a folksy rapport with the audience where they felt like they knew me. And when I was dating my oldest son's wife, we'd go out in public and people would come sit down at our table just like they knew me. Which didn't
I feel
go
like
over
I knew you.
It didn't go over very well with her. But it was all because of that rapport. And think what that's meant for my ministry. As
Absolutely.
I lead worship and a preacher, I've learned to let people in so that they can know me, trust me, and love me.
Very good. Do you have any memorabilia that you kept throughout the years, or do you have nothing?
I have next to nothing from those years.
Really?
I've got the plaque that the Jerry Jarrett staff gave me when I retired.
No photographs or nothing like that?
Not really. Wow. I never had access to those. They were always for sale.
Yeah.
And I have a couple of old programs.
Mm-hmm.
But the good thing now is so much of it has come back on the internet that it's at my fingertips.
Absolutely. Well, listen, I want to thank you for the memories. I want to thank you for your time, and thank you for coming on our show. And you're a class act, and you're very kind and very approachable, which I appreciate that. So I just want to thank you again for coming on.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.